Welcome, welcome, welcome. It is Thursday. It is the 2022 version of October the 20th, I believe. And you're back here with me, Sean Butler, and of course Bugsy Malone. Guys, we are from the Spurs Talk Show. This is episode 71, I think, of Tottenham Walks. And it's a slow, miserable, damp squib of a day. And I didn't come dressed appropriately, wearing a hoodie. Needed something more protective. Is that some sort of metaphor for the game last night? Did we come equipped with the right mentality, with the right team, with the right formation, with the right manager? Some people are asking. Before we get going, guys, if you haven't already, please do me a favor and smash that like button, the subscribe button, and the notification bell, as it really does the algorithm everything it needs to tell it to share this with more Tottenham people who might appreciate the content and who want to be a part of the conversation. Just want to say again, thank you so much to everyone who has been a part of the conversation over the last couple of months especially. It's been growing every day, and I'm enjoying, really enjoying all of the comments and the engagements that are going back and forth. It's great to read them all and share with you guys my thoughts, and together we can develop our own opinions, I guess. Guys, look, where do we get going? Where do we start? Look, 2-0 away at Manchester United. It could have been 5, it could have been 6 had it not been for the heroics of one of the best shot stoppers in the world. I always say this about Lloris: when the less time he has to make a decision, to think about things, the better he is. He's very instinctive and instinctual as a goalkeeper, and last night he made 5 or 6 world-class saves, most of which were reflex. And full props to him, especially after what could have been considered a very shaky opening few minutes when he almost dropped the ball and it looked like it was slipping through his fingers. That could have sent him on a bad downward trajectory, but he turned it around and became fabulous. Saved our humiliation, at least in the scoreline. But in terms of the performance, every single outfield player for me was outdone, outshone, outfought, out-hearted on the day by their opposite number. And I'm going to include Conte on that as well, because I think he was outclassed tactically by Erik ten Hag. And from the first minute until the 90th, Tottenham was second best. We were second to every single second ball, every 50-50 challenge. Every time there was something there to be fought for, and all it would have taken was a little bit of aggression or passion or bravery. Manchester United were the people that were going in full guns blazing, and Tottenham were the players that were cowering away from the impact, that thought, nah, I'm not interested. To a man, every one of them was absolutely woeful last night. And look, from this point on, I just wanted to get that out of the way. That's how I feel. I think it was a shambles. I think it was an embarrassment. I feel so sorry for all the people that, went up and spent 4 or 5 hours in the car going up to watch that nonsense, and then probably got back home about 4 o'clock in the morning, to get up to go to work this morning. Tottenham Hotspur players should be ashamed of themselves putting in that kind of effort. I also want to just quickly say, before I get going on the intricacies, is I also think that Manchester United played really well, and so full props to them, full props to Ten Hag for finding their game plan, executing it, and for every one of the individuals to step up and take advantage of what was and what could prove to be a 6-pointer. There's 7 teams, maybe even 8 teams that are top 4 candidates this year. Arsenal obviously are in the fight now. Manchester City, Liverpool, Manchester United, Tottenham, Chelsea and Newcastle. And maybe if Brighton, or probably Brighton, if they were to get back into winning ways, they're on a bit of a downward trajectory with form in the last couple of weeks, but they are good enough to also have an inroad. The squeeze at the top is real, and Tottenham need to find a way to do better in big games, massive games. And I don't think it's necessarily down to the tactics. I don't think it's necessarily down to the technical ability of the players. Everyone who has a preconceived notion of what is wrong with Tottenham Hotspur generally throws their weight into, I'm getting soaked here, generally throws their weight into one bucket of blame. You're either someone who says it's Daniel Levy's fault, look at the bench, look at the team, they're not good enough. And on that basis, no other blame can go towards, say, Conte, because if they do that, it dilutes their message of Daniel Levy and ENIC are the responsible fact parties. So they have to put all their weight into that. And then people that defend Daniel Levy would throw more weight behind the idea that it's the Conte's tactics or lack of interest in making substitutions or pivoting or reactionary versus proactionary managerial ideologies. And maybe those people are guilty of not addressing the elephant in the room, which is that whilst the squad is better than last season, it is still woefully inadequate in certain areas, and it doesn't really matter whether or not the passion and the heart and the fight were there from all the players. Some of the players, no matter how much they up their game, just simply aren't good enough. So like I always say, guys, in my opinion, it's a little from column A, a little from column B, and a little from column C, D and E as well. I think that on the night, on any individual performance, you shouldn't have to blame Daniel Levy every single time, or ENIC every single time that we lose, because if you're going to do that, then every time we play well or every time we get a result, then if you're going to allocate your credit to the players and to the manager, then there's an inconsistency. And I don't like inconsistencies, just my personal flavour. So you can take a step back and look at the general team and say it's just not good enough, and that in January Levy better do better, or ENIC and Paratici better fill the gaps and back the manager. I'm all for that. I encourage it as well. And as you will know if you've listened to my podcast long enough, I think that whilst the window in the summer was good, it wasn't good enough. And I think a lot of the players that we signed haven't hit the ground running at all. Perisic, on paper, looked like a decent signing as a stopgap, as a short term until we got Udogie in or whoever the future of the left wing back spot is. On paper, Bissouma looked like a really good signing. In reality, he hasn't looked anything like the player that he did at Brighton. Richarlison hasn't settled in yet. Jed Spence hasn't been given any minutes. So you can't really judge him. Same with Fraser Foster. The only player that's really had enough time to have a slight, fair, reasonable gauge, and that I think hasn't let himself down, is Clement Longley, who's a loan deal. So the window was good on paper. It could have been better on paper, but thus far that paper vision hasn't translated into performances from these players. Anyway, I digress. Last night, for me, I think that the problem wasn't 3-5-2 versus 3-4-3. I think that the problem was the players not turning up. I didn't like the way that the midfield was set up. I'm going to stand under this tree for a minute so that I don't break the camera. I didn't like the fact that the 3-5-2 was set up in a way where Højbjerg was on the left of the three, Bentancur was on the right, and Bissouma was in the middle. I didn't like that horizontal pattern. I prefer it Bissouma sitting deep, and then Højbjerg and Bentancur can interchange as the 8 or the more advanced. I prefer it more linearly and positional rather than horizontal and zonal. For me, that allowed for all sorts of abilities for Manchester United to pass triangles through the team. And look, we didn't get back and help the defence. A lot of people this morning saying, look at how bad Davies and Dyer are, and giving Romero a free pass because of the performance of the defence was so leaky. But in actual fact, I thought they did just about as well as they could given the amount of pressure and weight that was on them. They didn't have a great game. None of them had a great game. I'm not going to sit here and defend the indefensible. They were all vulnerable, but the midfield were the main problem. Casemiro, Fred, McTominay when he came on, Bruno Fernandes, they absolutely dominated our three. And for me, I think it was in no small part because of the way that the three were set up, as I say, in a line. Horizontal line with zonal positioning where all three of them are responsible for going back and for going forward, versus giving someone like Bissouma a very stable and protective role to just to cover that area where Bruno Fernandes was occupying. That was a mistake. And then for me, just to carry on with the where do I allocate some blame to Conte or to the coaching staff and the formation, I also think that the lack of ability to change is also a mistake. I do think he has an issue with stubbornness or tactical tactical stubbornness, I'm going to call it. Like, the only reason that we moved to the 3-5-2 in the first place against Everton was because Richarlison got injured. I don't think there's any reason to suspect that he would have gone to the 3-5-2 had Richarlison not been injured. We would have carried on with the 3-4-3 into the 85th minute and then given the likes of Ollie Skip or Jed Spence or whatever the 3 minutes that they got. The reason why the game changed in that particular match was because of a forced issue, not because of a proactive one from Conte. And I think, again, last night there was no injury that forced his hand, and so he stuck with the same team, playing the same formation with the exact same instructions in the second half as we did in the first half, and if anything, it got worse in the second half. Now, those people that say, well, the reason why he doesn't make any changes is because the bench is so poor, and therefore that's back to Daniel Levy's fault, again, I'd point out that whilst I agree with you, the bench doesn't look fantastic and the bench does need to be stronger. We obviously do have two key injuries to two key players in the same essential position in an offensive mindset where if you need to go somewhere more offensively, then you can point to. But we did still have Lucas Moura and Brian Hill on the bench. And when Lucas Moura came on, he did look busy and aggressive and passionate, which is something that you always know that Lucas Moura, whether or not he delivers anything at the end of the day, what he does is he absolutely brings passion and fight and energy to every performance. And when that is so clearly lacking in the team that's on the pitch, bringing him on in the 60th minute should have been a clear and easy option for me, because that passion that he has can rub off on the other players and get them motivated. People like Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, who you usually look for leadership and energy and high passion and high intensity, he didn't have it. He looked exhausted and had a bad day. Same with Bentancur. And as I say, Bissouma for me was all at sea positionally, and his passing is entirely off kilter. Not just him, in fact, a lot of the other players on the pitch, when they had the ball and looked to pass left, the receiver went right. Everything was off. It was like the frequency and the bandwidth was all disjointed for some reason, and the reason is the sports psychology. It must be the sports psychology of having to go and play away against the Big Six team. Apart from Manchester City, Tottenham Hotspur have struggled for 20 or 30 years at going away to Big Six teams: Chelsea, Arsenal, usually Liverpool, right? Manchester United. We always go away, and for some reason it doesn't matter which 11 players are on the pitch, whether they've been involved before against the Big Six team, whether this is their first ever unified 11 against the Big Six team. They pull on that Tottenham shirt, and for some reason the mentality just isn't there. The energy and the passion is pulled, and we play a diluted version of ourselves. And it's a real problem. It's a real problem because despite the fact that there are individuals on the pitch and in the Tottenham dressing room who have got a ridiculous amount of silverware and medals and individual accolades between them. We've got World Cup winners, Champions League winners, Copa America winners, National League titles, national domestic cups galore from all across Europe, all across the world. And yet all of that goes out of the window when 11 players play together in a Tottenham shirt against Manchester United more often than not, against Liverpool more often than not, against Chelsea nearly every time, and against Arsenal nearly every time. Away from home, top 6 teams, massive problem, don't understand it. I'm not a sports psychologist, but it really does wind me up. But look, Conte deserves a lot of credit, a lot of criticism from me in this one, but you know, I also acknowledge that the team isn't good enough technically. Even if you do, as I said already, even if you do bring them up and have a better passion, a better fight in the players, some of the players just aren't good enough. But I think against Manchester United, 11 against 11, if you were to do a combined 11, and I've seen countless combined 11s on various Tottenham channels, fan channels this week, Manchester United fan channels and neutral fan channels, I think that the vast majority of them had Tottenham having 6 players to Manchester United's 5 on average on the combined 11. And so on that basis, I don't think that we can make the argument that Manchester United are just better players. I think we were beaten on the day by better tactics, by a better game plan that was executed with far more effectiveness and efficiency, and that our players didn't turn up. That particular aspect is not on Daniel Levy. When you look at the bench and you see that there's really not that many places to go when you have a couple of injuries, that stuff is on Daniel Levy and Paratici and Enoch, and hopefully if we can get Conte tied down to another contract and he gets that 200 million budget that he needs for January and the summer, whatever, that should be enough to fill the gaps. 3 or 4 players at 50 million a pop, and then we should then have enough to go and fight. And after that, there really isn't any excuses. For me, last night was all about individual mistakes. It was a real shame, and there's lots more to discuss, but I'm going to leave it there. I've been talking for 17 minutes and I'm getting absolutely soaked. Like, share and subscribe, guys. I love you. I'll see you later on for a live stream. Take care. Bye-bye.